making these constant decisions every day to consciously take care of yourself and decide what you want to do. And until you do that, until you're around new people in this new environment, being stressed out and also, being introduced to new things, you don't know who you are. Like, you're not the high school football player you used to be anymore when you're over traveling.
It's time to start being your extraordinary self and living a life that makes you happy. Each week, you'll hear stories of inspiration, conversations to improve your mindset, and actionable tips you can take to live an extraordinary life, because you matter. I'm Carrie Roberts, and this is Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things. Welcome to Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things, the podcast show. I am your host, Carrie Roberts, and this is another installment of our Connected Conversations where I bring in a bunch of different people and we talk about a particular topic. So today's topic is about travel, kind of a little bit as a whole. And I have with me today Lee and Patty, who have been with me co-hosting usually once a month on a topic. And then I also have two fabulous guests that I actually had on the podcast a few years ago now, that have traveled quite a bit. And so they are definitely, I feel, experts in this space to some capacity. So I have Hannah. She is calling in from California. Hello, Hannah.
Hi.
And I have Ivan, who is over in Idaho at the moment. Hi, Ivan.
Hello.
Welcome. So before we get into the actual travel piece, I actually want to start from the beginning and think about home. And I'd love, Ivan, I'll start with you to talk about where you grew up and what that was like in terms of the types of people, the terrain, the culture. Like, when you think of where you grew up or your home, what was that like for you?
Well, I'm from Boise, Idaho, and so obviously it's a potato state. So my childhood was spent mainly out in the fields, digging up potatoes. That's what got us through the winter time. I'm kidding. Boise's recently been discovered, and Idaho's becoming known for all the outdoor adventurous things you can do here. So I've been very fortunate to grow up in this location. But I will say, back when I was a child, I didn't know people that traveled. I didn't know people that left a lot. I hadn't been more than a few states away. And I really didn't appreciate Idaho for what it was. It took me leaving and traveling before I actually appreciated home and could consciously and intentionally make the decision to say that, this is where I want to keep coming back to, or not just because this is where the family is. And so, I love Idaho. I love the Northwest in general. If you like the outdoors and remote, wild country, it's a great place. We've got rivers, trails, all that good stuff. I'm not supposed to be saying this because I have a huge influx of people coming right now and everybody hates it. But it is what it is. It's a good place to live. So very fortunate to have had that background and have access to so many natural resources right out my backyard.
Yeah, that's interesting that you said, to have a better appreciation for when you come home. And as you said that, I was thinking about that for myself as well. Hannah, what about you? Where did you grow up? What was kind of that experience like, that culture, that terrain?
Yeah, I'm from very small town, Georgia. I was born in Macon, Georgia, which is central of the state, and moved to northern Alabama for 5 years as a child and was homeschooled there. So pretty sheltered, and then moved to a small town in South Georgia called Fitzgerald, where I went to a private school with 24 other people in my class. It was just we only vacationed to Sea Island or not St. Simon's, just to the beaches in Georgia. And we really didn't travel that much at all. I think coming from being homeschooled, and I was so excited to start school and to meet people. And I think I will just never forget, my first day of school was in 5th grade. And I remember sitting at my desk and looking at all the other kids in my class and just thinking, I could be friends with any of these people. I just wanted to know everything about all of them. And I think that's kind of carried over into my adulthood as well, that same curiosity. But yeah, I just didn't travel a lot growing up. So it's kind of something I've been really excited to do in my adulthood.
Well, and that's even interesting, like you said, being homeschooled. That's a whole nother level because it's much less people, just your family initially are much smaller, So.
Which I'm in the middle of 5 kids. So, there was plenty of us, but that was it. I didn't know much outside of my little bubble. So it's been awesome to be able to explore outside of that. And gradually, I'm still in the United States. I haven't done a lot of traveling outside of the country, but I've done a lot inside of the country. And I feel like once I see everything here, I want to do more, but it's slowly moving outwards.
Yeah. No, that's nice. Lee, what about you? Where did you grow up? What was that like? Again, the terrain, the culture for you?
Well, I grew up in Princeton Junction, New Jersey, which is a suburb of Princeton. So, kind of flat, but we did, we did go to the shore and, actually, thinking about it, I'm first generation here. So my parents did, love traveling. They came from Shanghai. My mom lived in Argentina for a little bit, my dad in Canada. And then when they came here, and had us as kids, they still, we still took quite a few vacations, mostly, driving when I was younger, wherever, Virginia or Washington, Cape Cod. And then my parents actually took us on a trip to France via the SS France. So looking back on that, I was in fourth grade. So I think I, kind of took that for granted because that's not something, most kids would do, go for 2 weeks and travel on a boat for a week. But, it was interesting because my parents definitely loved to travel. So I think that's where I got a lot of it from, because I kind of started traveling when I was pretty young. So yeah, that's good to see different things.
Yeah. Patty, what about yourself?
Well, I grew up basically where I live now, which is 2 miles from the ocean. So, growing up, the summers and all, you just spend it at the beach, to ride your bicycle there, home, all of that. So, and with my family, well, there was 4 of us, my parents. And so we didn't really do vacations. I was convinced or told that, well, we live where people vacation too. So why would we take a vacation? Kind of worked for all those years. I think the only real trip my father once won a golf, closest to the pin, he won $1,000, and we had a big vacation to see my aunt and uncle in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. That was our big family. So my travel started more when out of college and with the job that I had. But then I wanted to do a whole lot more. So then my children and we did more vacations, but pretty much most of our vacations were international trips. I can talk about that later. Yeah, they were fun.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting where we start. I grew up in New Jersey as well, not where I'm based now, but I grew up in I always say it's like the Iowa of New Jersey. It's why it's called, the Garden State, which people don't believe when they come through the airport, but very, very rural. And I went to school, so I wasn't homeschooled, but my grade school was very small. We only had, I think, about 50 kids in our whole grade, so it was very tiny. We did family vacations, but it was very farm country. Like you could ride your bike, mostly white. And so just, didn't really know anything else. And I feel like probably when I went away to college down in Virginia was the first time I experienced people from all over the world. And it was something I was craving so much, but it was also realizing just the differences, things I had never experienced being where I lived and hearing people's different stories. So that was kind of, I feel like, even though I went on vacation as a kid, it's maybe the first time. Was there a time, Hannah, I'll start with you, where whenever you traveled, either as a kid or an adult, where you realized that where you grew up was not the only way to live, that there was things that you didn't know before? Like what trip was that? Where were you? What did you notice?
I moved from small town Georgia into the city of Atlanta, which is still Georgia. And this isn't really traveling outside, like big travel, but just moving from small town to the city, I think was when I first had that realization. And I remember a trip I took to Denver. I was in Colorado for a month, and that had just a similar experience as Ivan was saying, where when I flew in, I remember being in the mountains and just being in awe of how beautiful everything was. And on my flight back into Georgia, just looking at all of the trees, and even though it was flat and it was trees, everything I was used to, I just got teary-eyed because I realized that it was beautiful there too. But I think as far as culturally, just from where I came from to having that feeling of, maybe where my sense of normal is not everyone's sense of normal, was moving from the small town just into the city, really.
Yeah, so it doesn't even have to be that far, which is interesting. Patty, did you have that at all? Have like an experience where you were like, oh, people live differently. They don't just live like I do. There's different stuff going on around the world.
Well, probably my first trip really was again associated with work. So right out of college and coming from little, I'd say, shore town here in New Jersey, it was to New York City. And so working in New York City for a week, and that was very much a kind of a culture change, but a wonderful one that really did open my eyes to, I want to see more and different places. And I think that's part of what then I, for 40 some years worked and traveled and loved all the trips, and work-wise got to go to a lot of places I never would have gone throughout the United States, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands. And then we, as I said, did our international family vacations. So each one of those experiences, wonderful to meet people and see everything so different.
That's interesting. You both said something very local. Ivan, what about you? Was it something that was local? Like you were 10 minutes away and you were like, oh, I live a different life? Or what was it for you?
No, since I grew up in Boise, Idaho, my dad was from a small town. So I guess I completely agree. No matter what country you go to, the division between, or the differences between like rural towns and the big cities is like some of the biggest cultural differences you'll find anywhere. So I can definitely relate to that, especially it's something I've been reflecting on more now within Idaho, with my dad and brothers living in a small town and me living in the big city, which is Boise. But my first experience of, actually recognizing that was probably when I studied abroad in Spain, which was actually my second time out of the country. And that was because I was living with a family who was preparing our meals and seeing, like their customs, traditions. Even the most shocking thing to me was the fact that they'd have a box of milk, or a box with boxes of milk sitting behind the door, not refrigerated, because you wouldn't refrigerate the milk till you opened it. Or the eggs were sitting on the counter all the time. They didn't refrigerate the eggs. Like the little things like that are what catch your, like, obviously you recognize the differences first. And then once you get used to it, then you start to see all the similarities and the similar values and stuff, just expressed in different ways in these different cultures. But I think my study abroad in Spain was definitely the first time I was kind of immersed in it. And then from there, we were visiting other countries. And I do remember my roommate at the time, he's from New York, and he was a bit younger than me. And he came over definitely with the intention and the idea that he was going to open his mind and his Spanish horizons. They wanted to see how the Spaniards lived. And, he knew that he just was like, wanted to be really critical of the US. But then that's how I felt. But then he got to a certain point where he was so used to like certain efficiencies over in the US that like, he's like, everything's just so inefficient here. They shut down every time I want to go somewhere for CS, just like he'd get frustrated. And I'm like, yeah, man, like just chill out. different priorities over here. It's okay. But yeah, definitely. It was fun seeing his, like, even though he went out open to it, like he definitely had like his abrasion to like these like really small inconveniences that seem really annoying, which I relate to. Every time I'd want to go to the store, it seemed to be during siesta, and everything was always closed when I needed it to be open. But if you go with the right mindset, it definitely can help, like, I don't know, change like your expectations for the world.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Lee, what about yourself?
Yeah, again, I think I was exposed to a lot, just culturally, because my parents were from another country. So that in itself, taught me a lot about different cultures. And then we'd go into the city a lot because that's the only place we could get, Asian groceries. But again, they also did a lot of vacations. Vacations were very important to my family. So, like I said, we went to France, we went to the Bahamas, we went to Puerto Rico. When I was very young, my cousin kept going to Hawaii every summer. So I was like, I want to go. So, I saved up some money. My parents helped me a little bit, and I flew to Hawaii by myself when I was 15. And then that was where I think I really got the travel bug. I'm like, yeah, I can do this. And this is really cool. And I love the beach life, So, all those things I think have always taught me to be really, really open-minded about the way other people live. And, no way that someone lives is necessarily right or wrong. It's just different. And it's good to be open and aware of that, and appreciate the things you have, but then also look at things that other people have, and it just broadens your experience. So that's, what I'd like to, teach my kids too. Be very open about that.
Yeah, I like that. I always say that with this show, I feel like I've traveled the world because I've interviewed people everywhere. So it's like I haven't left the room, but at the same time, just having conversations is interesting for me. But again, the physicalness of being somewhere else makes a difference. And I remember, Ivan, when I spoke with you years ago, you had talked about this idea of kind of traveling being this rite of passage. And I think sometimes, when we're young, you go on vacation, you with your family. And then if you're a single person, sometimes it's hard to find a friend or a family member if you're not with someone that goes with you. And so some people choose not to travel because they don't have someone. And going by yourself can sometimes be intimidating. Do you remember the first time that you traveled by yourself? And can you kind of talk about that idea of a rite of passage and maybe what that meant to you and maybe if that's changed since last time we spoke about it?
Yeah, no, I definitely remember that. I'm trying to think of my first time because, it started off studying abroad, and then there was, a lot of things that I did on my own while over there. But it's usually, you're making so many friends. It's hard. I find that it's hard to truly travel alone these days, just because of the way that the travel networks work and hostels work. It seems like everyone's, no matter how unique you try to make your path, there's always someone going in the same direction. And so you do make these connections and you group up and you team up. So even though you might start off alone, it's usually pretty easy to make friends along the way. And what's nice about those relationships, it's easier to, walk away from them like when they don't serve you or if you're going like in a different direction. Whereas when you commit to a trip with like a friend from home, it's a lot harder to be like, hey man, like, you go do your thing today, I'm gonna go do my thing. Some people take that really offensively, or if they're not comfortable, then they just want to latch onto you and stuff. And so it's hard to, even though you can try and set expectations before you leave, it's really hard to do that. But I do still think of travel as I think there's a lot of different ways that people can kind of do some soul searching and just kind of learn about themselves. I do think that taking a gap year or traveling is one of the best ways to do it. And I gave a speech on this to some college or high school students in Montana, just talking about how you build up you carve away, you create this mask that you wear around your friends, around your family, around the people who have known you for so long. But you've really never stepped out of this environment, this comfort level, this support system on a day-to-day basis, and had to make all these decisions for yourself and find food and find where to live. And I say find food in like I mean going to the store or going to the restaurant was still pretty easy, but making these constant decisions every day to consciously take care of yourself and decide what you want to do. And until you do that, until you're around new people in this new environment, being stressed out and also being introduced to new things, you don't know who you are. Like, you're not the high school football player you used to be anymore when you're over traveling in Australia or in Thailand or somewhere like that. And so it really is a good way of just stripping away everything that you thought you were, all these identities that you've tied to yourself and all these expectations that people put on you, and going out there with a fresh start and kind of being able to kind of reinvent yourself and step back and be like, who do I want to be? And also just some of the experiences just push things out of you that you might not have expected. You don't really know, how you're going to handle things until you're missing flights and buses. And you can't speak the language, and people are sending you in wrong directions, and it gets a little frustrating. And then you kind of find out who you really are.
No, that's a really good point, which brings me to Hannah. When we spoke years ago, I remember you telling me something to the effect of, a friend kind of telling you, you don't necessarily have to travel. You can find yourself here. Just because you're going somewhere else doesn't mean that you will find yourself, which is sometimes what a lot of people think. And I think that's part of why you had started your Happy Strangers account. Do you remember that conversation? Kind of, how did you feel then? And is it different now?
I think that, so I left Georgia. I've been traveling this year. I left, it was February 7th. So I've been on the road by myself for 4.5 months now. And I think that being back in Atlanta, I wanted to travel. I mean, to get out and see different things, but I am really thankful because I stayed there for a while. And I think I became really comfortable with who I was there and at home. And I think when I left, I didn't think of myself leaving to go find myself, or I thought I knew myself. Like I thought I'd already got there. I was very content in a place that I wasn't I didn't necessarily want to be in there anymore. I went from Atlanta, moved to the suburbs last year, and I spent a lot of time by myself because the pandemic happened, the world shut down. I was in my apartment, and I'm an extrovert, and that was not my ideal scenario, and it was tough for me. But I think I came to a place where I was at peace with that, and at peace with being alone, and at peace with being myself. And I'm just thankful that I left at that time. So I just didn't feel like I was running away from anything. And I feel like everywhere I've gone, everywhere you go, there you are. And that's just how it feels. It's like everywhere I go, I'm showing up as myself. But I will say, I have also learned a lot about myself along the way too. I didn't leave thinking that was what I was doing. But as Ivan said, it's just interesting putting yourself in all these different scenarios. And within the country, I don't feel like there's been any culture shock. It's not shocking. The different cultures are not, we're still in America. I still speak English. Everyone around me has spoken English, and it's been slightly different the way that people do things, but not shockingly so. But it has been really, just cool to see myself in all of these different scenarios and to see how I fit in New Mexico or in Colorado or in Southern California or Northern California or Seattle or wherever, all these places that I've gone. It's still me showing up, but I do feel like I've learned these little different things about myself along the way, if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Yeah, go ahead, Ivan.
Oh, sorry. No, you go ahead first.
No, go ahead. Is it off her thing? Go for it.
Yeah, it's off of hers. And something interesting that I connected with what you said was, and I've been thinking about this too, is I talk a lot about travel being kind of like a catalyst for kind of like learning things about yourself. But I really think that it obviously depends on how you travel, because if you're going to, say, in an all-inclusive resort somewhere like that, it's a different experience. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's a different experience than if you're like backpacking and you're putting yourself in situations that are causing adversity. And I think that, like what you said, like even during the pandemic, being in one spot, you were able to learn a lot about yourself. And I think it's almost adversity is kind of like that underlying factor. It's not necessarily, I think travel can be, if you travel in a certain way, it can be a good catalyst for adversity. But there's a lot of other ways to stimulate that same effect. And I think that, to me, that's that once you get out of your comfort zone, to me, that's where I think the self-discovery comes from. So whether it is, being an introvert, being forced to sit inside for a year during a pandemic, or if it is being in another country, not speaking the language and not getting lost, like there's a lot of different ways to stimulate that. And I thought that was a great connection there between the two.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I agree. I would consider myself an extrovert, and during COVID, I've never spent so much time by myself. And at the same time, now I kind of like it. You start to be like, wait, hold on a second. Like now I live by the beach next near Lee and Patty. And I love going to the beach by myself, taking pictures, reading, walking, because sometimes when you go with someone else, they're like, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm bored. I'm like, no, I want to be here for 2 hours, So there's a niceness of sometimes that alone time as well. Lee, are you resonating with any of this? Because recently you've been doing a lot of travel, you surf, you go to Hawaii quite often, that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, definitely. Even resonating a lot with what Ivan said, because, I did do a lot of traveling when I was younger as well, before I got married. And one of the things, like Ivan said, living in hostels and meeting people is just like an amazing experience. But also some things happened along the way, and, you don't expect it. But, I ended up, started the trip, quit my job, started a trip going to Colorado and skiing and living in hostels, and then went to Hawaii. And I was with my friend, and, I had a ticket that, was like 6 months out to go to Asia. So I couldn't come back home or anything. I was there for good. Well, my friend ended up going to a different island with her boyfriend, and, kind of just left, and that was my friend, that's the way she was. And I was actually supposed to get an apartment with this other guy that I met from Australia, nothing, like a couple. But, it was just like, oh, you met somebody. Yeah, cool. He ended up not coming because he got a job and had to fly back home. So here I am all by myself going, oh my God, what am I going to do now? And I just remember like sitting on the beach going, I got to figure it out. I was like, you could bum out over it, or I could figure it out. And I went back to the hostel and ended up meeting more great people. And we all got an apartment together. And, I lasted another like 4 months, with different people. And it was really a good learning experience. And I came out of that going, wow, if I can do that, I know that I can figure things out. Like things will work out. So I really do. I did resonate with what Ivan was saying, but, now I think along the way, I'm older now and yeah, I don't kind of want to sleep on the floor or share a dorm room or bathroom, so my style has changed, but, being kind of newly single, I still am, traveling by myself. So I'm kind of back to, sometimes it's hard to find people to travel with. And I'm like, sometimes I travel with someone and sometimes I'm like, you know what, I want to go. I'm just going to go. And like you said, nobody knows who you are when you meet people, but I just love meeting people, and just getting to know more about them and learning more, like you said, about yourself. And again, the best thing is, you know what, I don't feel like going out tonight, or I feel like hanging out on the beach, like you said. You can really just kind of expand and learn more about yourself and do what you want to do. And so, yeah, I would definitely encourage people to, just once in a while, even if you go away for just, a weekend or something, just kind of experience that. I think it's a good way to learn about yourself. And like you said, you don't have to go far, just spend some time, exploring different things. I think you'll learn a lot.
Yeah. And I think before I go to Patty, when we're talking about kind of this adversity and even, again, travel, sometimes we think it has to be so far away. But I remember when I got divorced and I was like, okay, I have to do stuff by myself. And I wanted to go to this sunflower patch that was an hour away. And I was so nervous. I was like, oh, well, what if I get lost or what? And I was like, this is like having an inner monologue with myself of like, that's ridiculous. Like challenge yourself to go. And I went there and it was gorgeous. And it was so interesting because I was so aware of the fact that I was like, again, no one's complaining. No kid is running around. No, the dogs were peeing. It was like everyone had stuff. And I was like, I'm just with myself. And like how nice that was. And that there's a beauty to that as well. And so sometimes it's empowering, those little steps that you kind of take. And as you start to kind of travel, as Ivan said, where you're going places, maybe you don't speak the language. I don't know if I'm ready for that yet, but as you kind of start to learn that, it is very empowering. Patty, any thoughts on this? I don't know how much travel you did by yourself. I know for a while you had, when you were younger, your kids were younger, you were a single parent. What was that like or how did that feel?
Well, and I think so. It's same for my kids growing up because they grew up here as well. I convinced them you live at the beach, so we don't have to travel. In part because really didn't have the means to do it. But and I guess that's why, like I said before, for me, work was really wonderful as a way to have opportunities paid for to visit. And it was with the Department of Agriculture and all of the nutrition programs. So I went to visit the Seneca Nation up in Niagara Falls, to major cities, to these little tiny towns and having to find a school on this back road and all these things, and way before GPS. So your map reading skills really get tested. And so I think too, I think I remember hearing it says a lot about your character, how you handle tangled Christmas lights and lost luggage.
And slow Wi-Fi these days.
That is true as well. Yeah. Hannah, I'll ask you because I think, when you're traveling by yourself, there can be anxiety for people, but I feel like for women, it's a different level. Men maybe don't think as much about the safety element as women do. And I remember there was a girl that I used to teach dance to, was super quiet, super introverted. She used to travel by herself all the time. And I was like, how do you do it? And she was like, oh, I plan every second and I don't talk to anyone. And I was like, she'd just go and just be silent. I said, well, what do you do if people talk to you? She's like, I ignore them. I just walk away. And I was like, that's an interesting way to travel. Hannah, for you as a female, you're in the US, so it's a little bit different. You're not having a language barrier for the most part, but did you feel any anxiety about being a female traveling alone, or where you're going, there were people you knew to some capacity?
Each place that I have, it's been really interesting. So each place that I have gone, I feel like when I go to a new state and decide I'm going to be there for a little bit, I keep finding friends from college or high school. Like there's always, so far, like honestly, where I am right now, I don't know anyone. I'm in Morro Bay, California. It's in between Los Angeles and San Francisco. Never been here. I don't know a soul here. I've only been here for a couple of days, so we'll see. But it's actually been really awesome. But like when I just got back from Sedona, Arizona, and there I had a stranger buy my lunch. Don't even know who it was, but someone saw that I was traveling alone and just, maybe it was my waiter. I don't know. But then the next day I went and got a glass of wine at a winery and was listening to someone play music and was on the phone with a friend. And I was like, I've had a glass of wine. I really want another one, but I probably shouldn't. And she was like, well, why don't you just get a bottle and take it home? And I was like, okay, I'll do that. And so, so it's just the opposite. So I bought the bottle and my waiter comes back up to me and he's like, the bottle's taken care of. You just, it's great. Thanks for being great and being here, whatever. And I feel like I kind of have this, and I mean, you have to have discernment. You can't just, with my Happy Strangers project, I'm used to talking to everyone who will talk to me. And I just kind of go into it assuming that people like me and assuming that people are my friends unless I feel like they don't. And then I get away, and it's weird because when you're a stranger, or not weird, but it doesn't hurt my feelings. Like if there's a bad vibe or if someone is like put off by me, it's just so easy to move on and just keep moving forward because there's nothing personal attached to it. So I actually haven't been that scared. And there's been maybe 2 times or so where I had that feeling. I got kind of sick in San Francisco and didn't feel well. And now when you're physically not feeling well and you're alone, that's scary. I didn't like how that felt at all. Like I wanted someone to know that I was sick and to feel sorry for me, I guess. I don't really know, but I mean, I got over it, but, yeah, I mean, and if someone wants to travel and be alone, that's the beauty in it though, is you can, if that's what you want, you can, when you're traveling by yourself, you can kind of do whatever it is that you want to do. But I feel like on my travels so far, I've had a really nice balance of seeing people, seeing old friends, meeting new friends and being alone. And it's just been kind of intermixed between all of those things. And I think because of spending so much time alone last year, the alone time, I'm just more comfortable with it than I used to be. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's a good point. Lee, do you ever feel that, especially, when you kind of first started younger, again, we're talking about there wasn't GPS, there wasn't certain things. Thank God for GPS. I'm not good at reading maps. So, yeah.
Well, actually, so my career is in sales. So talk about before GPS, my whole territory was Virginia up through Canada, out to Pittsburgh. And, so I was driving or flying everywhere with, maps and it was challenging. But I do have to say, yeah, there is a different factor for me as a woman, especially when, I started traveling for sales. It was, when there weren't a lot of women in sales at the time. So I think the times that I was like a little more careful is, like a guy would think of nothing, about going downstairs and having dinner or going to a restaurant or sitting at a bar. That wasn't something that I was going to do, a female alone traveling. I also had to be careful where I was staying. I didn't want a room on the first floor with an accessible door or a room near an elevator, so there were some things that I, just had to be cognizant of and to be a little careful. And I did have an experience when I went to Paris for a business trip, and I decided to go a little bit early and, ran around trying to see everything, by myself. And a stranger tried to pick me up, and it was very, very uncomfortable. It was right outside the Louvre. He was asking for, I remember he was asking where something was, and it was like literally right in front of him. And then he started, walking and talking and walking really close to me. And I started to, get very, very uncomfortable. And I remember I pretty much kind of escaped when we were crossing the street and the light turned. I ran across the street, and I actually went and hid in a store for a while because he was a really tall, foreigner. And, it was very uncomfortable. And I had remembered, reading something about people trying to, target women traveling alone, to be careful. So anyway, I just wanted to get back to my hotel room before dark, because I had to, walk back to my hotel, which was not close to where I was. So it was a little scary, I have to say. But I think, you just have to be aware. and have a plan B. I had my cell phone with me at the time, and I pretended to call my boss and say, have a conversation with nobody on the other end saying, oh, I'll meet you for dinner, to give him the hint and everything. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's like, you don't want to be too much about it. I think, I definitely feel the little travel I've done. Most people are pretty friendly, but definitely as a female, yeah, you do have to have your guard up a little bit, be a little bit more aware. Patty, anything to add to that as well?
Well, I guess it's similar. I mean, I traveled pretty much. It was for work by myself. I mean, during the day you'd have meetings and different and all, but I guess I got to the point where staying at a hotel, it was like, well, I am not going to just sit and have room service because I'm not going to eat where I'm sleeping. So I would go down to the restaurant or I'd go down to the bar by myself. And I guess I always found a spot to sit. I mean, where you can kind of see everything and then kind of make a little friends with the bartender. And I just found at the end of the day, I guess I just had good experiences where people, they just all kind of wanted to chat and decompress. If anything, toward the end of my career with the traveling, I noticed people were doing that less and less. People would go to the bar, but they would be on their phone the whole time. So that conversation, just that, how you doing? How's the day? All that didn't seem to be as much to me anymore. I don't know if others are experiencing that when you travel. That I just found being able to have those, just those kind of friendly conversations. It was harder to get people engaged in it. So I don't know if others experience that.
Yeah, Ivan, what are your thoughts as a guy? I assume it's a different experience, but I don't know. Did you ever feel in certain countries you've been to that, I feel a little bit unsafe or something that you kind of experienced, or are there tips that maybe you have to make sure that you do stay safe?
I mean, there's definitely been areas where I've been more on guard, but definitely probably rightfully or wrongfully, like the ego, I think as a male of feeling like I can take care of myself definitely plays into it. I will say I've been very fortunate to have had 3 big trips. I had more than 3, but 3 that really stood out to me, either with a girlfriend or a girl. So one was I was dating a German girl when I was in South America for 5 months, an Argentinian girl when I was in India for 4 months, India and Sri Lanka. And then my friend, we traveled on the potato truck together here through the United States. And all 3 of those experiences really gave me like an in-depth look of what it was like to travel as a girl. And so, I mean, South America was like mainly catcalling and stuff like that. It was I was constantly aware of all these guys was constantly like yelling things, saying things and stuff. And I'm like, guys, I'm right here. Even if but not that should matter. Like they shouldn't do it anyways. And then in India, I had my long hair at that point, and my girlfriend at the time, she was blonde, super blonde, pale skin from Argentina, and we were very popular. People wanted a lot of photos with us, and as soon as one person wanted a photo with us, like everyone wanted a photo. There'd be a line of people to take photos with us. We'd be getting handed babies and stuff. But a lot of the guys would come up and they'd be taking like pictures with us, and then they'd slowly like to sit their face a little closer to hers and try and cut me out. And people would actually follow me on Insta or Facebook, and their profile picture would be him and my girlfriend, like in their profile pictures. And she had her butt slapped a few times, and the cultural dimension of the separation of the sexes there was really hard for her, where she felt like a second-class citizen. Like when she would order more naan bread in a restaurant, and the waiter would look at me and ask if we wanted more naan, and I would be like, I don't know, ask her. She's the one who wants it, and realizing that. And she had a couple of times where she actually broke down because of it. And then even here in the United States, one of my best friends, Christy, she's a big tiny houser. She's built like Barbie and beautiful girl, big flowing hair. And we were at a lot of events. She loves to get dressed up. Not a promiscuous person or anything like that. Like there was nothing like that you could even justify saying that she was like desiring this attention. She just likes getting dressed up. She is built the way she is. It's really natural. And going out with her, like seeing the way that guys responded to her was probably some of the worst I'd ever seen. Like when people were drunk leaving the Kentucky Derby, or when we were out at bars, or even at our events, the things that guys felt like they could come up and say to her was shocking to me. And then I would see like people would find her online, and the messages that she would get in the inbox were insane and creepy and weird. And I mean, I feel very blessed because I am someone who's probably overconfident, overcomfortable, and maybe some people call it naive or whatever. I don't know. I do feel very comfortable myself, And even though like I know there's a ton of women out there who are traveling, going to crazier places than I've been, and there's a lot of great role models out there for it who have great tips on how to do it. I do know that traveling as a female individually, especially where you're going, comes with a whole other set of expectations. And I'm always trying to humble myself as to my privilege as a male, knowing that it's a lot less worse than me. I would say the one thing I feel like if I am going to get into like trouble or get some negative attention, it's more likely to turn violent, I guess. There's just more ability for it to erupt in that way. But I do think that in general, the day-to-day micro harassments of women is definitely there. And I'm humbled by it, but also I'm trying to become more aware of it and also just be more understanding and more helpful in those situations now.
Yeah, no, I thank you for sharing that. And I think, like you said, it's interesting to note that it happens at home. It happens in the US as well, and sometimes worse. So it's, just an awareness as a whole. And it's always funny if I go out with friends, locally or whatever, and like when I'm talking to people like this, I'm always super friendly. But if we're at like a bar at night, I am like, don't talk to me. I'm very like, move out. I'm like the mom, but also the bouncer at the same time, because I'm just super aware of like everything for some of the reasons, a lot of you just explained. It's like, still have a good time, but just always having that little bit of awareness as a female, I think is important. Some of you guys have traveled to a lot of different places. Is there a place that either surprised you or you liked more than you thought, or someplace you're like, oh, I would go back there a million times? Is there something on your list? Lee, I'll start with you.
Oh my goodness. Bali, I definitely want to go back there. Loved it. Loved the country. Loved the people. Everything about that. So that's definitely on the list to go back. One of the places I think I was a little surprised about was when I went to Brazil. It was for a work trip, was how crowded it was. I just remember going to the airport and, what should only take maybe like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, took over 4 hours of traffic, and people like walking, you're on a 4-lane highway and people are like literally standing in between lanes trying to sell you snacks. Like on a highway. I was like, oh my gosh. And they want to have the World Cup here. Like crazy. You want more people in here? So I have to say, I think that was surprising, because you're used to New York and traffic. That was like nothing compared to what I saw there. So, but
Hannah?
A bucket places.
Yeah, well, it's always interesting, like you said, like Ivan was mentioning before. It's like the little things that sometimes you notice. I haven't traveled that much outside the U.S. I've been to Ireland, and I will say I was just shocked at how nice people were. I was driving the wrong way, and someone got out of their car, and they were like, "Let me help you." And I was like, "In the U.S., they'd be honking and cursing. There's no way anyone's helping you here." So it was just kind of little things. You're like, "Whoa, that was so kind of someone to do that," little things you notice. Hannah, any places that maybe surprised you or you would love to go back to?
Yeah, it's funny. I keep telling people everywhere I go is my new favorite place I've ever been in my entire life. And I just feel like that keeps happening to me. I will say back in New Mexico, I had a beautiful experience there. And just the wild horses is something that I had never seen before. And getting to pet the wild horses. And I met a girl who worked at a cafe she owned a horse sanctuary, and they all know the horses. It was like, that's Shadow and that's, but they're all wild. And that was really cool to me. That was one of the first places I had stayed for more than just a couple of days. And I think San Diego, I didn't know anything about San Diego. And I think that's where I want to eventually make home. I want to end up there. I think that was probably the town that fit me and my personality the most. But, yeah, it really is. Like I said, everywhere I go is my new most favorite place I've ever seen. And traveling up, I stayed for a month in Ojai, California, which if you've never heard of it or been, it is so beautiful. I felt like I was in a little fairy tale land. And it was just sunshiny every day. They even have an outdoor bookstore there, and it's outside. And I came up to the guy who owned the bookstore and I said, "What do you do if it rains?" And his response was just, "Oh, it doesn't." What? And being there for a month, and then I drove up to Seattle after that, and I had never been to coastal Oregon before. And coastal Oregon just took my breath away. And after being in the sunshine, they say if you only have sunshine, you miss the rain or whatever the quote is. But I mean, it was just so peaceful and calm. And I feel like everywhere I've gone, just there's a different word that I would use to describe it, and a different, like I remember when I was standing on Cannon Beach in coastal Oregon thinking, I'm not sad right now, but if I have to grieve something, like when I'm sad in the future, when something happens to me that I need to process, this is where I want to be. Like, I'm going to come back here and sit in this misty, it was just calming. And I mean, everywhere's just so different. I don't know. I kind of like being everywhere. I think I like this lifestyle more than just one place.
I love that. Was first of all beautifully said. I've been there. My sister lives in Portland, and we've done the coast, and it's when you see the mountains with the beach, and like you said, that mist. It's very different than the East Coast.
Gentle is the word I would use. It was like just soft and gentle, and I just felt very peaceful.
Yeah. No, I love that. Patty, what about yourself?
Well, our first really big trip with my two sons was to Paris. They had the opportunity through school to travel to Germany, to Italy. I had never really been abroad, so it was like, okay, where do you want to go? And they picked Paris. Both big history majors, museums and all of that. So we did 7 days in Paris. We did, side trip to Normandy and, some other spots. And then I figured after 7 days with their mother in Paris, what they really wanted to do also was kind of a backpack trip. So they went from there off for another 10 days. I mean, literally had a picture of them walking with a backpack and a baguette hanging from their backpack. And they went from there to Amsterdam, to Greece, to Italy, and then made their way back to Paris and home. I don't think I'm ever going to hear all of those stories of their travel, but it created such a wonderful bond. I would say it reinforced the bond with the two brothers. And gave them even more the bug in all of us to travel. So that one was just, so much. And then we had one trip to Spain, which unplanned was the year that Spain won the World Cup. And we happened to be there through all of it. So going to these different towns and little local places where, again, didn't know the language, but you didn't need to know the language as the soccer football games were on. And we're there for in each city for the whole thing. And then our last was, now they're older, with their wife, significant other. We did a 10-day trip to Provence in a little town called Gourdes, and rented, one of the vacation rentals by owner, just this beautiful little villa where we could walk into Gourdes, but it also was our home base. So to the point of, so we didn't have all 6 of us kind of going around together, but people could do day trips off. It was the lavender season. It was just perfect. So we want to do that again. So if you have suggestions for where we could do something when you have, when you do have 6 and now have little ones, just looking for where do we go next? So thinking of Portugal. I don't know if anybody's been to Portugal, but.
As I say, yeah, Ivan, I think, is the most traveled here. And actually, Ivan has lived in other countries for a while as well. So what would you say, Ivan, is either a country that surprised you or you're like, I would definitely go back there again?
Well, at first, I want to double down on the Pacific Northwest love. I do think that the old growth rainforest close to the coast in Oregon is some of the most incredible country I've ever seen. I was going through on a road trip to a wedding just north of Portland a couple of years ago, and did some car camping along the way, and some of the hikes and stuff. I mean, once you get over there, the trees are so much bigger than in Idaho. And there's places where this massive forest is coming out of like lava rock, forest ground. And then you're walking through these trails and there's moss, there's mist, there's ferns everywhere. And the water is just this crystal blue. And it just, I was just walking around like, wow. Just, I felt like it was like a psychedelic experience or something like that. And it definitely is some of my favorite country, and been looking to get back there for sure. As a traveler, I always struggle with, there's so many places I want to go. But I always like love going back to places, but it's always that battle of, do I go somewhere new or do I go back to a place I've already visited? I do know that for me, Eastern Europe is a place that I'd love to go back to. And it did surprise me. It made me realize I spent way too much time in Western Europe, which was so much more, I don't know, culturally similar. I definitely realized for myself, like I love places that are more culturally different than what I'm used to. I feel like that's where I feel more stimulated. Everything's way more exciting. There's all these smells inside. And Eastern Europe was definitely something I don't know, it was not on the radar, but it didn't seem interesting to me. And then we took a ferry from Italy to Croatia. And I mean, we rented a car and we drove down the Dalmatian coast, and some of the water and natural features there and the coastline and the food. And I don't know, it was just, from there to Hungary to Croatia, not Croatia, Czech Republic, like where Prague is, like some of that country and stuff. Like it just, to me, it got more interesting the further east I went. And I just wanted to keep going that way. So definitely would be like a region I would definitely go back to first. But still, there's so many other places I haven't been yet. It's hard to go back.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I was thinking, Lee, you're talking about Hawaii. I think probably that was probably one of my favorite family trips that we did. And I remember I was in college at the time. And I think what I loved about it was I remember we would go to the hotel and they had again, the newspaper at the time, and everything was happy news. I was like, what is this place? There wasn't one bad thing that was happening in Hawaii.
People.
What'd you say?
They're poor weather people.
I don't know. That's what it is. Like, oh, it might rain tomorrow for 5 minutes. That's upsetting, but it was great. I mean, I was like, what? This is like the happy land, it's beautiful, and I remember my parents being like, oh, could we ever live here? Because like you're landlocked, like, so it's so small. And my parents have been back multiple times. So obviously that's not the problem, but I just remember that little tidbit of it. And then when I was, similar to what you were saying about Oregon, when I was in Ireland, and now I'm forgetting the name of the huge thing that you see there but it's the green. I'm forgetting the name of it now. Very famous, but it's very vast, and you walk across it, and you think you're at the end, but you never are. And it's like, people take all these pictures, and it's just beautiful. I've never seen so much green, I think, in my life. And so when you look at something that's just so large and you're in it, I think that's just a beautiful thing as well. So no, I think these are great places we're talking about. As we're coming up here on the hour, just to finish up, is there maybe, I'm going to have you think of one tip that you could give people about traveling. It could be, how to save money in booking. It could be how to pack. It could be where to go next. It could be about something internal. What's maybe one tip of advice that you feel like would be really helpful for people listening that want to travel now or into the future? Ivan, I'll start with you.
All right. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to do two tips.
Okay, good.
When people come to me for travel advice, I'm like, the book that I wish I had written is called Vagabonding by Rolf Potts, one of my favorite books. And if you're wanting to do any kind of extended travel, I just think that the way that he breaks it down and helps you prepare like the whole mindset and go into the experience in the proper way is incredible. And that it'll help you, one, make sure that it is the right decision for you, because I don't think the lifestyle is for everybody. But then also, like, it just helps make sure your affairs in order. And then it also just make sure you get the most out of the experience. And so I think that that's a great place to start, is reading that book for anybody who wants to do like extended traveling. And then I also just think like starting small. I mean, when I think back, I always want to recommend like, just get the ticket, just jump off the cliff. But I remember like, that's not how my journey was. And that's not how most people's journey was that, would also recommend the same thing. Like you can have an incredible travel experience in your hometown. Most people don't think of that opportunity. They don't go and explore those little rural towns outside of their city. It doesn't like we've been talking about all night. Like you don't have to go far, to have like an incredible travel experience. I think more so what's more important is the mindset you use going into it. So you can show up in your own hometown. You can show up in like a city 2 hours away and have just as an enriching experience as flying to the other side of the world. So start small, don't overwhelm yourself, and go have fun adventure.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Ivan, because all during COVID, we were getting crazy. You couldn't go anywhere outside of your state. And I made it by myself. I was like, every weekend I'm going somewhere different in New Jersey that I haven't been, and just found so many great places. And, places even locally, I was like, whoa, I didn't know I could walk to this in my town. I didn't know that was there. You start to just become a lot more aware. So I agree, travel can be close by. There's a lot in our own states. that we don't see. I mean, you think about New York, how many people, if you guys are on the East Coast, how many people travel to New York and see certain landmarks that we who have lived here never go to? We're like, we don't need to go to that. We've seen it. But, that's important too. Lee, what would you say? What is your one tip? Again, it can be anything that has to do with travel.
I'd say don't stress, and, I always say, inevitably something always happens on every trip, and sometimes things aren't really great things that happen. Sometimes they are, but I always say they make great stories later. So it's all building memories, so whatever you do, I think just look at it as building memories and experience,
That's a good one. Patty, what are your thoughts? What tip?
So one tip, I guess I would just say you don't need to pack as much as you think you need to pack.
I'm still learning that.
and you could always get whatever you need when you get there. And now what I do, instead of I don't know, some trinkety souvenir, I like to find something very local to purchase, either a piece of jewelry or, like a blouse or a sweater or something that's made there from where I'm visiting, so that adds to the memories, not just, trinkety.
But you can't get on Amazon.
Exactly.
Yeah. I like that.
I can go, oh my God, I could have gotten this on Amazon.
Yes, it makes a difference.
Yeah, because I have again from Spain some jewelry that was made by local artists there. I have this beautiful sweater from Vancouver, and it's just, they become stories.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like that. Hannah, what is your tip?
I have so many, I don't even know where to begin, but one thing that I have hacked this, I think. Okay. And so this is important. But when I first started this trip, I got in my car and I started driving from South Georgia. My first stop was Baton Rouge, and I just was driving. And I actually found a website called trustedhousesitters.com. And I have been finding pet sitting jobs all over the country. And it's this thing. There's a lot I could say, but you pay to be on the app, on the website, and it's like $100. You can find a coupon. It's like $100 with the coupon for the year. But here's the thing: it's really hard to get your first job, because through the website you house sit for someone. There's no money exchange. They don't pay you to be there. You don't pay to be there. So it's for travelers who want a place to stay for free, and for people who have pets who want to travel and don't want to pay for a pet sitter. But it's really hard to get your first job because you want good reviews. And that's like how it works, is once you start getting good reviews, then you're more trusted. So if anyone gets on this app and to try that, I just have to say, expect to get turned down 1,000,000 times and just keep trying. Just keep going. But I think it's like that with everything in life, right? Like you just fail more and then you'll be more successful. But it has really, I think I've let that kind of navigate, which I've gotten Airbnbs here and there and everywhere. But the longest, like here where I am now, I'm here for almost a month. I'm not paying to be here. And I have a cat that's outside somewhere. That's my responsibility. It's okay that he's out there. He's allowed to be out there. He's really cute. But it is like I've hacked it. That's how I feel. As I feel like I've somehow I don't know how, it's shocking to me that I've made it last this long, but that's how I've really been able to extend this, because I work part-time and I work remote, but that has just it's bought me so much time. And there's towns that I've gone to that I would have never, I just wouldn't have chosen to go to some of these places that I've gone unless I had been taken there. And then I'm also in someone's home and they tell me about the place. That's the hack. That's
and you don't have to pay for a place to stay. If you don't mind,
insane.
With pets or whatever, that's great. I think that stuff is fabulous, because a lot of people always ask, how do I make this happen? How do I pay for this? Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of different things. And I think that's a great example.
Yeah,
that's wonderful.
I have things planned until the end of August right now. And maybe we'll continue to plan beyond that, but that'll be 7 months of me living with, my stuff is in storage. My life is in storage and everything else is in my car. you talk about packing lightly, I'm traveling with like a bicycle, a juicer. Like I don't even know. It's ridiculous the things and everywhere I go, I want something new that I pick up. And I decided to take up art, and instead of buying like paper, I buy canvases, and like my car is packed to the brim. But yeah, I really do feel like it's been, if it wasn't for finding, I don't even know how I found that website. I have no idea. But if it wasn't for that, I just wouldn't have been able to do it for this long. And it's been beautiful because I don't really know where I'm going to end up or where I'm going to live. I know it's not Atlanta anymore, but I'm able to see everywhere and figure it out after that. So
I love it.
Very helpful.
Is so exciting. I love it. So if people want to connect with you, Hannah, where can they do that?
It's the easiest thing to do would be find me on Instagram, and I have 2 accounts. I have a personal one and my project, but my project is Happy Strangers, which is pretty easy to remember. And I am interviewing people that I meet along the way through my travels. That's pretty easy to remember, Happy Strangers. And my personal account is linked underneath it. It's Han Banana, but there's an underscore after Han, and it's just find it under Happy Strangers. It's the easiest way to do it.
Perfect. Yeah, your project is great. Like I said, I know you've been doing it for a while. The photography is wonderful. The questions you ask, similar, kind of thing. And I love it. So when I found it, it's great that we were able to connect on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Ivan, what about yourself? If people want to connect with you, they have questions, they want to follow you, where's the best place to do that?
I think the easiest way is also Instagram. Feel free to reach out with any questions or start a conversation. I love meeting people. Ivan the Intrepid is my handle on Instagram. And yeah, that's probably the best way.
Perfect. Well, I thank you all so much for sharing your insights, not only the actual travel stuff, but just kind of the internal journeys that you went through with the traveling. I greatly appreciate you all being here. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. It was nice meeting you all.
Yeah.
Same.
Safe travels.
Thank you so much for listening to Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things. If you'd like to be a part of my community, please join my email list to receive positivity in your inbox and updates on the podcast, as well as some other fun things, by going to podcastcommunity.online. That's podcastcommunity.online. And always remember that yes, you matter. You are an extraordinary person, and that your life should be an extraordinary one, doing the things you love most and spending time with who you enjoy most.